it's Jen here, your functional diagnostic health coach and personal training expert. And I'm talking to you guys this week about one of my favorite topics about gut invaders. Now there's three main types of gut invaders that we'll typically see, or I typically see in my clients, and actually is most common with anybody or with any doctor or functional medicine or naturopath that you might be working with. And that's parasites, bad bacteria, and opportunistic yeast or fungus overgrowth. Now I know it might be kind of weird to think that you have some of these things growing in your gut, but the likelihood that you do is actually extremely high. So there are studies that show, for example, that over 50% of the world's population actually has an overgrowth or an infestation of a bad bacteria called H. pylori. And out of those people, 80% of them actually don't even exude any type of symptoms. Another really common one that I'll see, or that most people know about, is also candida. And there's studies that show that about 60% of healthy women and men actually will have an overgrowth of candida albicans in their gut. And of those people, that 60%, most of them are women, about 20% are men, and about 20% are young children, essentially. So that's just an example of how prevalent these gut invaders can be. And the crazy part is that these gut invaders actually dictate a lot of how we act, the choices that we make, and our day-to-day lives. They're not just impacting our health. And your gut is one of the most important cornerstones of your health. I mean, there's more and more research and studies that are coming out about this. You guys are probably seeing a lot of this, even in the media about probiotics and the gut microbiome and all of these topics that people are starting to talk about. Well, that's because our gut is this central area where all these important functions happen. It's where 80% of your immune system is housed. It's where 90% of serotonin and dopamine, your happy hormone and well-being hormone, are produced, along with 30 other neurotransmitters, or basically mood hormones, are made. And it's also there to protect us against toxins. So the intestinal lining, or the lining of our colon in our gut, is meant to keep toxins out of our bloodstream, as well as that's where we absorb nutrients. And also it's where we break down food and where other things in our body are made, other signals are sent out. And so you can start to see how when there's chaos, or if it's hosting a gut invader like a parasite, a bacteria, or a yeast, this can create chaos, or it can start to really impact our health. When these types of invaders move in, it suppresses our immune system, and it makes us more susceptible to colds and viruses and flus and all kinds of other things. Now, amongst making us more susceptible to actually sickness, there's a lot of other things that these gut invaders can dictate, and we don't even realize that often until we recognize that we have them, and then we get rid of them. So for example, one of the main or most common things that I see with people that have a gut invader is that these things actually can cause cravings. So anything like gluten, dairy, sugar, soy, alcohol, these are like crack for gut invaders. Parasites and bacteria and yeast feed off of this stuff, and they can actually manipulate our urges for them. So these gut invaders can get in there, and what they can start doing is they can actually manipulate the different hormones or signals that our body is getting about being satiated or full, and about hunger. And then they can essentially also induce these autoimmune-like responses that make us hungry. So if you find yourself like not being able to control your cravings for any of those foods, for carbohydrates, specifically like glutinous items, sugar or dairy or alcohol, like if you get those really strong cravings, that could be a huge sign that you actually have a gut invader going on in your inside. Something else that's really common that these things will dictate is our mood. They really, really mess with our mood. There's actually certain strains of these pathogens or invaders that will screw with our mood hormones. So for example, Clostridium difficile, or for short, I'm going to call it C. diff, it's a bacteria that specifically impacts serotonin, which is our happy hormone. So we can see a correlation with C. diff and depression. Not only that, but a lot of these gut invaders will produce their own neurotransmitters or mood hormones essentially, and then that screws with the production of ours, where it either makes it too much or too little. So you have certain neurotransmitters that are kind of like your energizing, or we call them your excitatory neurotransmitters. And if you have these gut bugs that are getting in there and they're producing similar neurotransmitters of their own, and then you get an increase in these excitatory or energized type of neurotransmitters or mood hormones, then that can cause anxiety. So if you guys have experienced anxiety you do on a regular basis, that could be a sign that you have a gut invader. Also, on the other side is that we have mood hormones that actually are calming, and they kind of bring us down, and they're meant to balance the energizing neurotransmitters or mood hormones. So you can have specific gut bugs that get in there and they produce more of those calming neurotransmitters, which creates an imbalance and then can result in things like depression. So if your mood has been off, you haven't been able to balance it for a while, if you have a lot of ups and downs, again, that could be another sign that you have gut invaders. Now, another really common sign of these is if you feel like you just have janky joints. And having joints that crack or are painful or inflamed all the time, it's not necessarily a sign of getting old. There's actually specific types of parasites such as Blastocystis hominis, which I'll call blasto for short, and Entamoeba histolytica, or E-histo, that actually get into the synovial joint fluid and they create more inflammation. So when I work with clients that have either one of these types of parasites and we work on getting rid of them, their joint pain will actually go away. And I personally experienced this. I had blasto, and I also had H. pylori, because those two like to hang out together. And so I was having joint aches and pains all the time, and I thought it was just because I was a runner and I worked out all the time, and it was just typical to have that. But once I actually cleaned out my gut and got rid of those things, I don't have those joint aches and pains at all anymore, you guys. Like, never. I have your typical workout, like muscle soreness, maybe for a day, and it goes away, but the chronic joint aches and pains are completely gone. Now, the last thing that I see that's super common that most people will suffer from, or how these invaders are manipulating them, is with an autoimmune trigger. So they say that there has to be 3 things in place for you to have an autoimmune disorder. One is that you obviously have to have the gene for it. 2 is that you have leaky gut, so a suppressed immune system already. And then the third is that you have to have something like an environmental trigger for an autoimmune disorder. Well, guess what? Some of these gut invaders are actually triggers for autoimmune disorders. Certain things like blasto and proteus and mirabilis, bacterias, and even E-histo, like these can also all be triggers for autoimmune disorders. So if you have an autoimmune disorder and you want to manage your symptoms better, then it would be really important for you to take a look at what's going on in your gut, because if you have any of these invaders in there, once you get rid of them, it can actually manage your autoimmune symptoms even better and help you to go into, what's it called? Like reverse it, basically, into remission. That was the word I was looking for. Or if you have history, like if you don't have an autoimmune condition, but it is of a concern for you because of maybe family history, you know that you have the gene of it in your family, then taking a look at your gut health could be really important to look and see if you have any of these types of gut invaders that could possibly trigger the autoimmune, because they also contribute to leaky gut, but then they're also triggers for autoimmune. Exactly. I don't understand. So, oh, there's Siri. So anyways, you guys, it's crazy how these gut invaders can just be living inside of us. Most people are walking around and they don't know. They know that they just don't feel right in their body, like something is off. And I'm going to be talking more about this in an upcoming webinar with my colleague and good friend, Master Life Coach and Hashimoto's Thriver, Molly Hamill. You guys have heard me talk about her before. We're actually hosting a webinar on September 8th. It's a Thursday. And it's all going to be about your gut and the secret to healing thyroid and adrenal fatigue issues. We're not only going to be covering just those things related to adrenal fatigue and thyroid, but we're going to be talking about the gut health overall. Like, what are the best ways to go about testing these stuff? What are the signs to be looking for? And how does this impact your overall health? So I'd invite you guys to hop on that webinar with us. You can click on the link below, go back to the email or in the blog, find the link to register for this webinar. If you can't make it live, that's totally okay. Go ahead and register for the webinar, and if you do, you'll get sent the replay link. And we're going to be talking more about gut in the coming weeks as it relates to just overall health. So I hope you guys found that really useful. Be on the lookout for any of these symptoms or correlations that I talked about today, and certainly join us for that webinar on Thursday, September 8th. Have a good week, and I'll talk to you guys next Thursday.